I'm the Cutroneo. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we're going to take a look at the newest firmware update for the Line 6 Helix, Firmware 2.50. Now 2.50 is a really big update. It comes with 2 amp models, 6 new reverbs, 1 delay, plus 77 legacy effects from the M series. I'm going to break up this run through into a multiple of different videos, and this video will be focused on the 2 new amp models. The 2 new amp models for this update is the second channel of the Mesa Boogie Lone Star, which is the dirty channel, as well as the second channel of the Friedman Brown Eye amp, which is also the dirty channel. So let's take a look. So here I am starting with a brand new preset. And I'm going to go through and we're going to first take a look at the Cali, Texas channel 2, which is their title for the Lone Star. And before we get started, I'm going to do my high and low cuts that I always do for everything. I always start there. So let's take a listen to this. This is the stock settings, stock sounds, and we'll give it a shot. So we've got a really thick tone, really beefy sound, which is sort of characteristic of the Lone Star. So let's start doing a little bit of tweaking and see what we can get. So let's start with just cranking the drive. Let's see how much gain we can get from this. So definitely a really nice singing single note quality line. Pushing those gains up all the way really does allow for a nice sustaining lead. If I'm going to have that setting, I might back down the bass a little bit. And that's all on the bridge pickup. So what's really cool about that is that I've got the articulation of the bridge pickup, but it's still thick and creamy, like I would expect on a neck pickup. Bridge, neck. Super creamy on the neck. So let's see. So usually with Boogie amps, the treble is a very important setting. So we'll bring that treble up. So we've got this TS shape. I don't remember what that stands for exactly, but if we look at the options here, we've got thick and thicker. So let's take a look at this, see how that alters the sound. So we got just this basic sound. We'll do the same thing, but with it on thick. And then we'll do thicker. definitely thickens up the sound. I think if we turn down that treble, we'll kind of hear a little bit. Seems to add a little bit of gain, a little bit of sustain and compression, and definitely rounds out the sound a whole lot more. Let's see what our presence up a little bit. Very dynamic. Pretty easy to get some nice harmonics to jump out. Pretty good, like it. So let's mess around with the gain a little bit. I know it's not a super duper high gain sound, but definitely something that you can use for lyrical lines, solos and everything. Got plenty of gain. To me, sort of the sound that I hear when there's sort of two people who I think of when I think of this amp. The first one is Andy Timmons, but I think that for the most part, he usually plays on the clean channel with some kind of boost when he uses the Lone Star. But John Petrucci used this for the solo for Repentance from the Systematic Chaos album. And it's a super thick, creamy lead sound. And I'll link to a video of me actually using this amp model and sort of creating that kind of sound. Super bare bones, easy preset that I put together for that. But let's take a look at some other applications for this. So I'm going to back down the drive 1. So characteristic of this amp, it actually has two drive knobs, and they sort of cascade into one another. So this is the first drive knob down. Obviously, way less gain happening here. Let's see if I can get it cleaned up. It's not a bad mid-gain, but when I go into the middle position of this guitar and I'm using the coil tap, So definitely lots of possibilities. Let's see what happens if we sort of go the other way. So we'll bring this up, we'll bring this down. Let's see sound-wise what we get. Unlike bringing down drive 1 and keeping drive 2 up, going the other way and having drive 2 up and having having drive 1 up and having drive 2 all the way down, as you see, you still get this gainy sort of. So, but there you have it. The Lone Star. You can get the Lone Star channel 2. You can definitely get some pretty cool tones out of it. A nice sort of mid-gainy, thick sound. You can get a nice sustaining sound. You can get a nice clean sound. A lot of possibilities within just this one amp model. All right, so now as you can see, I've got the Freeman Amp called up. It's the Placator Dirty is the Line 6 designation. All I've done in this is I've brought up the amp and cab together. This one uses a 412 Cali with V30s, which is a Mesa Boogie cab with vintage 30s in it. The Mesa Boogie Lone Star had a Interstate 212 cabinet. So the important thing to note is that they're not giving the cabinets of these models, of these amps as well. I don't know if that's going to come out when they do the clean channels of both of these amps. But they matched them with cabinets that go accordingly with the sounds that usually you'd be looking for with this. So these are the stock settings. I haven't touched them at all other than doing my high and low cut. So let's take a listen. So this is super woofy and bassy sounding. Let's see if I can cut some of this out. Take the bass down a whole bunch. I'm going to bring up the presence to about 5. Let's see what happens. So that sounds better. Let's see what happens if we add some gain to it. Won't max it out. So, not bad. Maybe add a little bit of treble to it. Add a little bit more presence to it. So already I'm liking that a whole lot more. So let's, bass mids. Let's see what happens. Let's give it some boosting, some mids. Sort of comes alive after the 5, after 5 on the setting. All right. Yeah. Maybe a little bit more bass. So let's see what this HBE does. Definitely seems like it adds some gain. right? So we've had the fat switch on. Let's turn this back off. You can definitely hear that bass come in. So with that fat switch down, you're definitely able to run the bass a little bit higher, at least for my taste. You know, I can still get a nice tight sort of sound. But then with that fat switch on, it gets a little woolly sounding, a little woofy. So, okay, that's cool. Let's see what this is, the C45. And seems to add some kind of a little bit of lows somewhere. So saturation. It's pretty self-explanatory. Adds way more gain. Also a little bit of a volume drop there too. So let's see. Let's do that. Oh, not that. This. All right. So, let's see. You know, I think that some of these, you know, can be used in a solo situation, right? But if I wanted a tight rhythm, I wouldn't have any of those on. But if I wanted some more saturation, seems to compress the sound a little bit more, gives a little bit more sustain, as well as the HBE does sort of the same similar thing. There's a little bit of a volume drop due to the compression, so you would have to, you know, alter your volume to account for that. But overall, not bad. I'm not really loving the sound, the vintage 30s sound. So I know I didn't even go into the Lone Star, but I want to try something real quick. Sort of give a little bit of a taste between this cabinet and then a Marshall style cabinet and see what that sounds like. All right, so I took the exact sounds. Actually, funny enough, when I went to go just use an amp, and or rather the amp version of this, it sort of transferred all the sounds that I had, all the settings that I had from the amp and cabinet model, which was interesting. So I don't know if that's a new thing. If it is, it's definitely cool because then I can go back and forth. Makes things a little bit easier. But anyway, here I'm using now a different cabinet. I'm using the Greenback 25s. And this is what that sounds like. like that a little bit more. It sort of has a bit more presence and bite to it. Now, granted, I'm using a different mic, a closer mic, but let's hear the difference between that and the V30s. So, obviously, I think this goes without saying that, you know, the cabinet choice that you're going to use is definitely a big part of your tone as well as all the different mics. So if I went to the 57 and then I brought this down to 1 inch from the cone, which is the same setting as the greenback, let's see how that sounds. I like that. And then from there, I think I could add way more bass back into my sound. And maybe even, actually, I'm going to try that fat switch again. So, let's see. Fat on. So, when messing around with this amp, I would definitely suggest taking a look at the cabinet settings. This is the vintage 30s, the vintage 30 cab, which is what comes when you load up the amp and cab together. Going over to the dynamic 57 and using 1 inch away from the amp, that made a big difference, at least for me. You know, it might not be your personal taste, but for me, gave it the clarity that I was looking for, that the other settings, the stock settings on that cab, didn't give me. Which is interesting. You know, it's just, you know, options that you have available to you, depending on what you're looking for and what sounds you hear in your head. So, thanks for hanging with me during this video. Like I said, this is the first video in a multi-part series taking a look at all of the new effects and amp models that are in the new Helix Firmware 2.5 update. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up. And if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to my channel. I put out videos regularly. I will be putting out a new video every day throughout this whole entire series that I'm going to be doing. So you definitely want to be subscribed. You definitely want to hit that bell notification button down next to the subscribe button, so that way you get notified every time I release a video. Thanks again for watching, and see you guys next time.